think a lot of it for me at first was I was like, oh, damn, I really don't know this stuff. When I actually got to college and I built my first project, that's that clicking point.
I really respect the kind of platform that they established, but last minute, something happened with one of the officers. I feel like they were a little desperate. At its core, like, there are other professions where you can get those things, but the reason why you choose to be an engineer is so you can solve problems.
Controversial opinion. Interview prep should not come first. For CS, that means Leetcode.
Welcome to the Beaver Hacks podcast. I'm your host, Havel Konda, and today we have a very special guest, Sebastian Torresola.
Great to be here.
Well, Sebastian, you just went to Callbacks last week. 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, I think.
2 weeks ago. Tell us a little bit about that. I want to just jump right in.
Yeah, so a lot of us OSU students applied to Callbacks, and we got in a team of 4. And a non-funded flight or a non-funded trip to a hackathon called Callbacks, which was honestly a great experience. We ended up winning a prize for it. But I guess to summarize the whole experience, we basically just traveled to California for a hackathon hosted by UC Berkeley. I think it was the largest hackathon at OSU. And we built a Web3 or blockchain-based project targeting like one specific track for this company called Sui, and that probably was the biggest reason why we won a prize at this hackathon, is because we targeted that specific track or that specific company. There's not a lot of people that went down that track, so but yeah, overall it was a great experience. We got to live in San Francisco for like 3 days. We booked a hotel, got a flight there and back, and our prize money basically like funded our flight. So, yeah, it was a good trip.
Yeah, I mean, I know the last year, Tom Numa, we'll talk about him in a bit, but he won Callbacks, and really to just see that you guys brought it back home for OSU again this year, especially in like I think it was a pretty competitive track, to bring it back for a second time really boosted our school, and I just want to say congrats to you guys. That was some really impressive stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, second time in a row is kind of funny, but yeah, I think Tom last year won like the overall track.
Yeah.
We won like a specific one, but like the fact that 2 years in a row OSU students won that, it was probably like, I think it's the biggest, like it's branded as like the #1 biggest collegiate hackathon in the United States. So pretty cool experience.
So yeah, on the note of Tom, I guess we'll do a little rundown for the viewers. Tom Numa, he is, how do we want to describe him? One of the most cracked CS students we know.
Sure, that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
And I feel like if we want to talk about me and Sebastian's story, it kind of starts with Tom. We met in App Development Club, Tom's club, and that's kind of how we started getting to know each other, and then I guess that's where my story began. And I'd say the same for you. But yeah, you want to talk a little bit about your early experiences with Tom and how that kind of shaped where you are in the club space?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, for context, Tom is I lead a club with Tom called App Development Club. And I think I joined that club as a vice president my freshman spring term. So late in my freshman year. And I think knowing him, I think Tom for me is like someone who really pushed me early on. I think he held high expectations of me, and because of that, I kind of like, it was part of my motivation to learn a lot of stuff early on, which is really important. So to touch on that topic of like being pushed, I think having a mentor is really important, regardless of like Tom. I think having a mentor in general, having someone to look up to, someone you can follow in the footsteps of, is probably one of the biggest things, the most important things I did joining as a CS major my first year. But yeah, so, and honestly, yeah, just leading a club with him too, it's been a good experience. I've been able to work on a lot of new projects with him and learned a lot from him in general, just from seeing him work. So yeah, having that like mentorship, I think I see Tom as like a mentor, and like of course a partner in my club, but that's the biggest thing, or the biggest, yeah, I think that's like to summarize my relationship with Tom, or my experience with Tom. I think is he's a great mentor. He's a great person to be around, and I highly recommend, like, if you're a CS student or if you're not a CS student, to find someone that's an upperclassman that you can learn from. So for you, I guess, we first saw you freshman year, and that was my first term leading the app development club. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on your first experience, I guess, with Tom or with the club, or just being pushed, I guess, by us as a club or us as organization.
Yeah, so I mean, I was coming in last year, freshman at OSU, and I really wanted to get involved. I knew that was definitely the way to go. And then Cookies and Club is one of OSU's biggest engineering fairs. That's really the place where you find all these clubs. And I remember going to the app development club booth. You guys had your trifold up, and then the laptop with the sign-up sheet. And I remember Tom distinctly, like, introducing himself, and then he gave me his Instagram. And I was like, oh, this guy's chill. And then, I decided I was going to show up to, like, every club I could. And, yeah, Tom would, I think it's the same thing where he kind of had high expectations of me, not because I did anything or was working with him, but simply because I was just showing up. And, of course, I met you and Taz and the whole gang at App Development Club. And that club, I guess I kind of went to ACM, and I kind of went to these other ones like the General Engineering Club and stuff. But App Development Club, every Wednesday, I remember seeing you guys, like, bringing in the pizza and the drinks and stuff, and that was really like a defining moment in my career or like college experience. And, like, from a perspective of someone who, like, had no idea what, like, coding was like, or hadn't even, like, written a single line of code, it was crazy seeing, like, you and Tom just up there and, like, writing all these lines of code and, like, talking about how to do it. And, like, it's really interesting to hear your side of things because you were once in those shoes too. Mm-hmm. And then you, of course, we were talking before this about, like, how, like, I would stay after and try to, like learn how to do a git push. And then Tom would be telling me, like, no, it's not like that. And, like, I would be typing it in wrong, and I would, like, add a space when we shouldn't. And it's just crazy to think about that aspect. And I remember you and Taz being, like, right there, like, dude, who is this guy? And, and that was definitely a pretty defining moment for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, everyone starts somewhere. I know you said, like, oh, you thought maybe me and Taz might have been like, oh, damn, what is this guy doing? No, like, everyone starts somewhere. I think this is happening a lot this year. Like, a lot of people just starting out coming to App Development Club, and trying to push themselves to learn, and that happens. And us trying to help you, honestly, is like, it's great for me. Like, being able to teach, or not teach, but, like, guide people through their early on, like, parts of CS is, like, honestly a big motivator for that, and definitely brings me, like, some form of fulfillment. I did want to talk about something I kind of forgot, but yeah, so that's pretty much summarized, like, our first experience with App Development Club, and being pushed by a mentor, or, like, people in general, is pretty important early on. And even if you're not early on, just in general in life, I feel like having someone that is, like, on a similar path to you, like, having a mentor that's on a similar path to your, is pretty important. Because for me, that's helped a lot. For me, my dad, I would say, is someone that kind of I've been able to, like, follow through in terms of, along with, like, other people in, like, OSU, of course, but, like, try to find someone for yourself, to, like, be that mentor for you, because I think it's very valuable in a lot of ways. Just, in general, it doesn't even matter if you're in CS or not. But yeah, okay, we were talking about App Development Club. How's Hackathon Club been for you, I guess? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or? Yeah,
you want to hear, like, you already know, I guess, the story, but I guess we could build off the App Development Club thing. So how I got into Hackathon Club is, Tom, he actually sent me the Discord invite for Hackathon Club. It was a fully eCampus club. And I think that was the first hackathon we did together. Do you remember Google Hacks?
Oh, yeah. We did that. Yeah.
So again, on that same note, I had no idea what I was doing, and I remember spending like an hour trying to figure out how to change like the background color on something. And then you and Tom were just in your like, you guys were doing your thing, and it was so cool to just see you guys like coming up with something. I don't think the product was ever finished. No, we did like a slight concept or something, but it was cool. It was a cool concept to see, but it was just, I don't know, it was just like everyone talks about Tom, but I also looked up to you in those ways. I saw this guy and you were only a sophomore at that time too. So I was like, this dude's a sophomore and he's so like locked in and doing all these things. And then with Hackathon Club, I was like, I want to get involved as well. The opening came in. They said they were looking for someone to run the club. I came in, and the rest is history. Nice. And now we're sitting here and we're doing a podcast, which is unbelievable to me. But I think on the note, you mentioned earlier that helping younger students kind of and guiding them is what kind of fulfills you in a way, and it really gives you like that motivation to keep going. How do you say that's really evolved over the course of your like club leadership experience?
Yeah, I guess to elaborate a little bit on that, I think I don't get so much now out of being a part of the app development club in terms of like learning skills or in terms of growing my skill set. But I think the biggest motivator to stay and keep going in club leadership is helping out others and fulfilling or like bringing up the student body, basically. So to answer your question though, I'd say, so when I was first starting out app club leadership, I really didn't know a whole lot, and I actually did in that moment, I did have other things like learning and growth or having this role in my resume as motivators to, I guess, participate or like lead this club. But over time, it kind of grew into, instead of like, oh, I want to lead this club because it might help myself, it's now more about helping, I guess, others and those who are still beginning and starting out. And so I know you had a different part, or like there's probably a little more you wanted to look into that. I kind of forgot the essence of your question though. Did I answer most of it? Or?
Yeah, no, okay. That definitely answers it. I feel like, I guess, kind of what I'm getting at is a lot of times, CS is super competitive, right? And a lot of people are kind of in it for themselves, right? And out of like some of the interviews we've had, but also just talking to other club leaders, I can tell that OSU at least is different, with our clubs, at least since I've gotten into this world of like leading clubs with you guys, it just feels like everyone's kind of on the same page, that it's not about us and it's not about something that we put on our resume, but it's about what we can do to serve the community, and that's at its core, that's what CS and engineering is all about. It's about solving problems and making people's lives better. And I guess, if you have any thoughts on that,
I completely agree. Yeah, that's definitely the essence. And like I mentioned, that's a big motivator now. I will say, like, to kind of sidetrack, I think clubs, from a lot of people's perspective, a lot of people might think that clubs are harder to get into than, or like club leadership is pretty hard to get into, and that like it's not really worth the effort trying to like apply it or something like that. And I think it's actually a lot easier than someone might expect. I think at other schools we're lucky because OSU has a relatively small student portion of the student body at OSU ends up going to clubs, compared, and at least in the CS world. But I'm sure that applies to like other majors. And then out of those like small proportion of OSU students that go to clubs, there's actually not that many that apply to like the leadership positions in clubs, because I guess a lot of people might not have time and they have other responsibilities as well, but fear might be a factor in that. And I just want to say, for me at least, when I applied to app development club, like I was the only other applicant for president or vice president. That's like, I did not have to compete against anyone. And I don't know what your experience was, but like there's not a competitive applicant pool, and clubs actually help you help you a lot because they push you to kind of, I guess, fulfill your responsibilities in the role, and depending on the club, you'll end up being pushed to like grow your own skill set in that like club's domain, basically. So I think it helps a lot, and don't be dissuaded. Basically, to summarize, don't be dissuaded from clubs if you think it's hard to get into, because it's actually not as hard as you might think. But I don't know, like, would you say that resonates with you? Like, did you think Hackathon Club, like you mentioned, you applied January, and then like, how hard do you think was it to get in?
I honestly feel like I shouldn't have gotten a leadership position as a freshman. Like, it shouldn't have been as easy as it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, exactly what you said, there was minimal competition. The thing about Hackathon Club, I really respect what the people before me did, the kind of platform that they established. But I think everyone has their own challenges. And one of the biggest challenges with Hackathon Club is it was completely eCampus. Mm-hmm. So, like, the entire officer team was eCampus, I think. And then, like, last minute, right before I came in, something happened with one of the officers. So they just, like, last minute, the president was gone. So they needed someone to come in and replace him. And they were just kind of, I feel like they were a little desperate at that point to find someone to replace it. So the new officer team was, like, mostly sophomores and freshmen, and we had no idea what we were doing. And again, like, it was just the people, like, whoever applied just showed up, and boom, that was it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you look at other schools, there's, like, a real, like, barrier of entry. But with here, it's just, like, if you show up, you know, mm-hmm. that's all you got to do.
Yeah, at least in the CS side, like, the actual, to even get into it as a member of a club, you have to apply at these other schools. Where OSU, like, you can just join a club whenever you want.
Yeah.
Like, literally, I joined Airsoft Club this week, and, like, all I had to do was click a button on a website. Like, it was not that hard. Whereas in other schools, like UC schools or whatever, the clubs are much more competitive depending on where you're, like, what field the club is, like, managing, basically. But yeah, so it's not as bad as you might think. I guess, do you want to stay on the topic of clubs? We could talk a little bit more about them. Curious to hear, like, anything else you want to...
I think maybe one thing would be, I remember having a conversation with Tom. I think it was right when I, like, became the Hackathon president, and he was kind of surprised. He was like, how did this happen? And I sat down with him for, like, 2 hours, and we just talked, and I was kind of optimistic at that time, because I was like, okay, we have a platform now, and I really want to help, like, again, like, help the community. And what he told me was, he was like, it's almost impossible because people just aren't motivated. And I kind of saw what he said when, like, as the year progressed, because it's like the same people. Like, we have a really tight-knit CS community, and it's like every club you go to, it's like we got the same guys. And part of it, I really like that. And it's like a really nice aspect where it's like you see all your, like, I feel like all the people in the CS community are, like, my friends. And we've grown closer in that. But at the same time, it means, okay, there's a lot of people that aren't showing up to clubs, and they're missing out on this opportunity. Mm-hmm. And then what I came to find out is, or I saw the progression of ACM this year specifically, where Steven and Peter and you, and then the other ACM officers, of course, you guys really hit home on that point. Steven, like, you know, his leadership is crazy, and mm-hmm. you guys really hit home on the fact that, okay, we got to focus on the people. I think he changed, like, the motto too of ACM, and Association of Computing Machinery. I got that wrong last time, so forgive me, guys. But yeah, with Association of Computing Machinery, you guys really focused on the students, and we've seen, like, crazy growth. Like, first meeting, 100 people showed up. Second one, 80 people, and we're getting, like, crazy numbers. So you want to talk a little bit about, like, ACM and your experience there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for ACM, I don't have as much insight into the general meeting. Like, I guess I do have insight into it, but yeah, I could talk a little bit about it. So yeah, last year at ACM, we basically got, I think, like 20 people coming to each meeting, maybe 30, 40, I'm not sure. But, and, like, the room was maybe, like, half full each meeting, sometimes even less. And this year, like pretty much every meeting, we've consistently had like a full room. And I think part of the reason for that, like you touched on, was because of the like focus on community that we're starting to, like, I guess, focus on. I think it's a lot easier because we don't expect anything out of anyone who comes to our meetings. They can do whatever. We're more like positioning ourselves as a resource for the CS students at OSU. Like, we opened up office hours recently as a club. Steven hosts office hours like every once in a while, and Kelly. And the office hours are literally just, you can come and ask about your CS assignments, talk about CS, talk about essentially anything. It doesn't even have to be CS, just advice in general. So I think because of that, and also because of the massive amount of leaders we have now, which is another difference we've made. Last year we had like, I think 4 leaders, and we were constantly scrambling, or actually it was definitely more than 4, but like 5 or something like that leaders. And we were scrambling sometimes, from what I heard, to like make meetings by the point of our meetings, like Thursdays. And this year we brought on like 13 officers, I'm pretty sure, or 11. And it's much easier. It's much more lenient on the workload for each officer. And that makes it so that we all have more time to like try and perfect the experience, essentially, and more time to think about what the experience should be like. So I think the 2 key things to summarize it is getting more leadership, or a bigger leadership team, and then also changing that focus to being a resource for the students, and also just a general fun club to be at, instead of like more, I guess, expecting a lot of knowledge out of the people that you're presenting to or are coming into your meetings, because we shaped our perspective to like say, okay, let's change our meeting plans to make it so we expect nothing out of like the people that come to us. Like, we touch on everything, so we assume you might be a freshman, or we assume you might be a senior, and we like tailor a meeting plan to have some like interesting points for all of those people. That was a really good decision. So yeah.
Would you say that process of planning events and meetings has changed since you came in?
Yeah, the planning definitely changed, because now essentially what we do is there's one officer that owns a meeting, and they're solely focused on that one meeting. And any officer can do that. And we have 11 officers. And so we just have, in the beginning of the term, we had already had like everything planned out till week 7. And each officer who owned that meeting essentially just had way more time to like focus on what they wanted to do for that meeting. How do we make it tailored to everyone, like the freshmen through seniors that come to our club? And yeah, how do we make it just fun to be at? So that changed. I don't really have a ton of insight for ACM last year though, but from what I heard, it was just a lot more rushed. So to talk about that, I think that would be like the biggest change.
Okay.
Yeah,
for sure. You want to talk about the fundamentals and like maybe your freshman year experience and how your experiences in freshman year kind of evolved to the place where you're at now? Because I think, the place you're at now is definitely pretty different compared to where you were when you started out.
100%. Yeah. First started out, I had no idea of what to do at all in this field. I started out really by doing my own research, trying to find as much content out there as possible to try and help me figure out what do I do to like make a career out of like this degree that I'm doing. Because I think the number one thing I was thinking when I came into OSU is like, I want to come out with a job, and I'm really scared that might not happen. So I was really pressured freshman year to go out and do my own research, and I didn't know about clubs at that time. So I didn't have the people in the clubs to help me, like give me advice or anything like that. That's why I talk about the importance of mentorship. I didn't really have that to start. So I spent a lot of extra time myself just researching, okay, what do I need to do to get from knowing nothing to like a career in CS or like software engineering. And so to summarize, to keep it kind of short, that's like the first thing I did. And over time, Well, I figured out that there's kind of like three main things really you need to do. First off, there's school, and there's Leetcode or technical interview prep, and then there's learning the actual skills like that are required for the job, and balancing those three. And there's probably a few others, but I think those are the main three. And balancing those three is honestly the biggest. Like, those are the three you need to balance essentially throughout your entire time in CS at OSU, aside from like outside life and things like that. Solely talking about career stuff, and yeah. So figuring out that balance freshman year, I think I did kind of figure it out, and I put a lot of time into learning the Leetcode side and learning the project side and less on the school side, which in some ways helped me a lot. And then my GPA does not like that, but it did help me a lot to where at this point I'm doing really well, and I don't actually have to put as much effort in now because I learned so much my freshman year and maybe like freshman summer, and I guess all throughout last year as well. But putting that work early helped me so much. So I don't know if you want me to touch into like each of those fundamentals or maybe like my advice on that, but that summarizes my freshman year, like what I realized.
Yeah, I guess you can just go into that.
Yeah, for sure. So talk about school, kind of a controversial opinion, I'd say, but putting in less work in school early on helped me a lot, and put more focus into those two things I mentioned, which is, I guess, interview prep and I guess just learning your skills and learning the skills that are applicable to the field. I think interview prep should not come first, I think, which is a controversial opinion. For CS, that means Leetcode. I think focusing on learning the fundamentals well in your school does teach you the fundamentals, but freshman year for CS students is a little weird because you don't actually get to do a CS class until like spring term. But learning it either through school or through your own learning is actually, I feel like, more important than going to skip ahead to something like Leetcode. I think, and it's actually really difficult to skip ahead to Leetcode, so you'll actually slow yourself down, I think, a lot if you try and skip to interview prep early on. I think that's something I did, was skip to interview prep, and it did help me, but I would say just learning the fundamentals would have gotten me to my position much quicker, because there's a lot of times where you'd have to backtrack and learn something that you skipped over in the fundamentals. So that's my advice for that. We can talk a little bit about, I guess, the school side, though. Yeah, there's challenging courses that come in your OSU CS degree or degree in general, whichever one you're taking. But I do remember one experience we had, which with Havel, which was vector calc last winter, I'm pretty sure, so almost a year ago at this point. Yeah, Havel, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, in the CS degree, there's a lot of weed out classes, right? 162, assembly, algos, operating systems, but vector calc, I'm pretty sure we're both doing the applied track, right? Yeah. So, and the applied track, vector calculus is a required class for that. So we both winter term took vector calc 1, and that class was definitely an experience for sure. When we talk about how focusing less on school can be beneficial, it takes a little bit of stress off of you when you're taking a class like that. Yeah. I guess what was our experience like?
Well, I guess it was it was a shocker. I think at first exam, I think I would say it was like too easy, so it kind of like kept us off our guard, I'd say. And then that second one, I'm pretty sure, was the hardest. I think
it throws you off a lot.
So be careful when you're like taking effort off school to either do other stuff in CS or just other aspects of your life, because it's more likely you'll just like want to like do more things outside of school, or CS or whatever. So be careful, especially when you're taking vector calc and 162 and 271, because you definitely have to put a lot more effort in those classes. Also, machine learning, if you're ever interested in taking machine learning, that's also another tough one from what I've heard. I was going to take it this term, but I ended up dropping it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about vector calc? I guess I talked about what I thought, but
yeah, I thought it was definitely, one of those classes. I remember how like I would be texting you and I'll be like, yo, have you pulled up to the lectures?
Oh yeah.
And you were like, nah, because I hadn't seen you in like weeks.
Yeah.
I would see you at the clubs. Like we would see each other at the clubs, but we wouldn't be going to the lectures because, major respect to teachers all around. But, vector calc teachers, they're definitely different breed, and, different teachers may not work for everyone. I mean, personally, I didn't feel like the vector calc experience worked too well for me. It was a little hard to follow. So, yeah, I would be texting you, I'll be like, dude, where you at? Like, it's been a minute. And I remember, like, do you remember that day when we were studying for the final? It was at like 4 p.m.
Library, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it on? It was on like a Monday or something. I don't remember, but I remember we pulled up at like noon, and we were there till like 5 or 6 p.m. and
we were grinding out the homeworks.
We were doing the achieves.
We were writing out the homeworks
on
the day of the final instead of studying for the final, which like
because the achieves, they also constituted like a big chunk of the grade, and they also had a system where if you every day you miss it, you lose 2% on each one, and then there was like the recitations that we would also have to go to. Yeah,
those 2%, it's kind of addicting to like say like, oh, I'll just do it the next day. That's how they get you with that vector calc. So watch out for that.
And then it starts building
fall
up.
Into the 2% trap.
Yeah, it just starts building up, and then you check it like a week later, and you're like, oh,
wow, 10%. Oh, that's getting a little weirder.
Yeah. So I remember that night. Yeah, I remember after that night we took the exam, and then I specifically remember you sitting next to me, and then you like opening the test, and then we both just collectively went,
yeah,
just that deep breath of, oh, this is gonna be one of those tests. And then afterwards, it was like pitch black, and like you, me, and like 2 other people, we were just outside debriefing after the test, and we were like, did you get that answer? Did you get this one? And
honestly, that's me with every test. I'm just like trying to see how I did, but especially with vector calc.
Vector was definitely one of those.
Nobody had a consensus.
Yeah.
Like everyone we talked to, I'm pretty sure we could not figure out. I think there's maybe some questions we were like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we got it right.
But
pretty sure.
Everyone had something different. Yeah. It was wild.
Honestly, yeah, it was a good experience though. I mean, in terms of that final study experience.
I feel like that aspect, like the tough moments really brought us together. In general, I feel like every time I go through a tough experience with someone, that's like a bonding moment. And I definitely feel like vector calc was our like, okay, like we're in this together kind of moment.
Yeah, those are good memories.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't even have to be school. It could be tough moments.
Exactly.
Life.
Yeah.
Look, tough moments are always bad, but they end up being the most memorable.
Yeah.
I'd say.
And I feel like, when you look back on like friendships and experiences you've had with people, you remember the bad moments, but you remember like what you went through with the person, and you're like, okay, like, we were in it together, so that made it less bad.
Yeah.
At least.
Kind of a sidetrack, but I'm just curious. It's a random question. Would you say the harder moments, you remember more harder moments in your life or more positive moments? Like, what are the moments you remember the most?
Ooh.
Because I don't know, just random thought popped up in my head.
This is like almost philosophical, but I think I think you remember the bad moments more. It's easier to remember those. It takes a little effort to remember good moments.
Yeah, you actually have to reflect.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think actually looking back and trying to remember the good moments is actually super important, I think. But yeah, that's a good thought. Because like, yeah, definitely the bad thoughts do stay in your head, or the bad moments stay in your head more for sure. I think you should. Anyway, we're getting a little sidetracked, but it was a interesting question.
Yeah, I feel like actually adding on to that.
Yeah,
this might we might be getting sidetracked, but this is a good one. Yeah. Do you look back at like your mindset in the times where you were like concerned about the future? You were talking about how when you were when you were a freshman, you were so concerned about getting a job after college, and you were so worried about those things. But do you think about how, like, when you look back, you realize how little there was to be worried about, you know?
I think it's easy. So that's definitely something that has come up recently in my mind. But I think it's easy for me to say that because I actually did have success. I feel like not everyone does succeed, of course. So having that mindset freshman year, like early on in my degree, was definitely helped me out a lot. Would I regret it? I don't know if that's the question you're wondering, or but do I regret having those thoughts of like, or do I think it's easy? Yeah, it's a tough one. I'd say,
Or I guess, like, does that change your mindset of, or I guess, I don't know, like, do you feel like, I think you worrying about it at the time was definitely good, and it pushed you to become who you are today.
mm-hmm.
But I guess looking back, when you think about, like, the mindset you're in, I guess it puts a little less pressure on you now. You're like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah, okay. I would say it definitely wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, because I really thought the jump from like knowing nothing to like knowing everything or having a career was like humongous, but it's actually not that much. It's a lot of very small steps you have to take, a lot of consistent steps you have to take over the course of your college experience. And they're not that many steps. Like, I don't think I actually put in that much effort to get where I'm at right now. I put in a lot of effort, but comparatively to what I thought it was, it's actually not that much. And I think a lot of students end up thinking that barrier to success is a lot larger than it actually is. So I'd say, yes, to summarize it, I'd say it's more easier than I thought it was. Yeah. And so yeah, that's my advice. I'd say, like, it's actually not as big as you might think. It's still big, and you still need to put in the work, but it's not as big as you might think. And hopefully that motivates you. But yeah.
Okay. Little segue here. Do you want to kind of transition to maybe talking about, you interned at SIBO last year, or I guess like this year technically,
Yeah.
but this last summer, and you want to talk about like what your internship experience was like? Because we know like you kind of got the whole school process down, but what was that transition like? Was this like your first internship as well?
That was technically my first paid internship, and I did
Okay.
like a volunteer/internship thing at a nonprofit before, remotely, part-time. But this is my first real internship experience.
So like, what was that transition from, like, for the most part only doing school, and then now you're actually like working in a real like software engineering kind of world?
It's a lot different than I expected. It's a lot similar to what I expected in a lot of different ways. So to summarize it, I guess the actual work experience was a lot more relaxed than I thought it would be, or a lot less intense than I thought it would be. Honestly, my idea of the work after college or in software engineering was there'd be a lot more like cutthroat processes, or things would be less flexible in terms of like decisions you can make or input you can give to like people that are like above you, or feedback you can give. But at least at the company I interned at, it was a lot more flexible. I got to give my mentors feedback on like maybe how they were mentoring or how the program was structured. And as far as the work itself went, it was a lot more open than I thought. Like, really, it's about seeking feedback and taking in that feedback, and that kind of process about just learning really comes from that feedback and you seeking it out. And I really didn't expect it. I thought it would be more, how do I explain it? I thought it would be a lot more there would be a lot more hand holding in terms of the internship process. But actually you have to take a lot of ownership yourself and to learn new things. It really depends on the company, of course, but I think an overall advice or like internship experience thing you can expect out of your internship experience is that you'll actually have to work to, I guess, learn new things, do a lot more on your own to learn new things. And yeah, so that kind of summarizes it. It was also just for general context. It was like a remote internship, and it was at like a finance exchange. So not necessarily a tech company. So processes might be a lot different at a tech company, but yeah, that was my experience. Hopefully that summarizes it well.
No, that was great. I want to circle back to the topic of ICPC, which is, can you remind me what it stands for again?
I think it's intercollegiate competitive programming contest.
Sorry, sure. I totally put you on. Crazy that you remembered that.
I'm not sure
off
if that's
the spot.
What it is. I'm going to be honest, but hopefully it's close enough. Gives you an idea.
But ICPC annual competition, the ACM sends you guys to. And you're the competitive programming officer as well.
Yeah.
So you want to talk a little bit about what it's been like, because you competed last year?
Last year I did, yeah.
So you want to talk a bit about what your experience was last year and how you kind of prepare students for that competition?
So to briefly summarize what ICPC is, it's just a programming contest. I'm pretty sure we take like 5 hours, and you go over like a problem set of like, I think around 10 problems, a little bit more. And you take just 5 straight hours. No internet, just your brain with 2 other teammates, and work on those problems for like 5 hours straight. And it's a pretty fun competition. It's based on competitive programming or algorithm style questions. But to summarize the experience, so essentially what we do is we like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., we go out on a bus, or not a bus, we go out on car rides, go to like some college in the middle of Oregon. I think we went to George Fox last year. And and then we took the 5 hours to grind out those problems. And for me, in my experience, those problems are really tough. ICPC is generally known as like one of the, I guess, the competitive programming or the programming contest for like college students. So globally, there's students that compete in this and try to like win a prize. And typically it's a lot of math oriented individuals or people who did a lot of like math contests in high school, even competitive programming contests in high school. You're competing against those students, really smart individuals that are doing these contests. So it's a tough experience. The questions are really hard. I think my team personally, we solved like, I think 3 questions in the span of 5 hours. I think I solved 1, and then I think everyone solved 1, which is good. Like, imagine going through that whole contest 5 hours straight and you didn't solve 1. So we're pretty happy with the result, honestly, because the questions were pretty hard. But yeah, hopefully that summarizes the experience. It's a grueling experience, but it's a really big bonding experience with your teammates, and just with the club in general. I think it's just that's probably the thing I took away from it most, is it really tied in those bonds and gave me great memories, which we touched on earlier, of it was a struggle but a very memorable experience.
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like ICPC was like, it's not necessarily a path that every CS major has to take, but do you feel like it had an effect on your growth as a CS student?
I would say it had zero growth, actually. It had nothing to do with anything, any of my growth. But if you do well, or if you dedicate time to it, it can help you grow. Okay. For our president, for our club, he's had a lot of success in his career or landed a lot of opportunities because he has dedicated a lot of his time to prep in that area, as well as a lot of other things in CS. But that really makes you stand out if you do well in that area. But doing well is really hard. So I personally didn't do very well compared to a lot of students in the U.S. or just in the Western region, which we competed against. A lot of students from California and things like that. So I would say I didn't get much out of it. It's mainly a fun thing. So personally, I enjoy solving those difficult problems and working through it. I do it every Saturday with Leetcode contests. And it's not for everyone, I'd say. You definitely have to enjoy that aspect of it. I'd say the enjoyment is the biggest benefit you get from it. But it also, the other benefit is that it helps you in the technical interview prep side of it. Because if you're good at ICPC or if you're good at algorithm style questions, luckily technical interviews for the software engineering roles at tech companies are very similar to those types of questions. And actually, the questions types aren't as similar, but being able to solve those questions will prepare you for technical interviews. So there is a pro in that sense. So I guess maybe not nothing. I didn't get nothing out of it.
Okay.
But
it gets you in that headspace.
Yeah. So, but yeah, overall, it was just a really good bonding experience. Like, that's my favorite part about it is the people, like the new people I met through it, and the strength in relationships. So yeah.
What's your favorite thing about the people in the CS community here?
Favorite thing, huh? About the CS people, I feel like that's a very general thing because I don't know if I can generalize all CS majors. It's really tough.
True. Okay, I
think
guess
of one
maybe
personality. But let me try and think for a little bit, or maybe rephrase the question.
Yeah, maybe like, what's the best part about the community? Like
Best
your
part.
favorite aspect of the community, not the people specifically, but the community themselves. Yeah.
That's a tough question. Favorite part of the community. I think my favorite part of the community is that we are a community. that's definitely not a good answer, but it could be that like there's a sense of like okay, I won't say there's a favorite part of the community, but all I will say is that there is something I get from that community feeling, and it kind of like refers to my answer is like my favorite part of the community is that we are a community. Like, we have that feeling of community. We're all driven to like some purpose of like either we enjoy this field or we want to do well in this field. I think that's my favorite thing about the community is we're all driven in that purpose. We all have that one motivation, so we can relate to each other a lot. And so from that, like, yeah, it's that common goal, I think, is my favorite part. And the people are great, but I can't really generalize like the people. Like, there's a lot of different people. Like, I enjoy different things from them. But I think if I were to say one thing's in common, it's that. And there's a lot of pros. Like, it's a lot of motivation you get if you're working on, pushing yourself with other people in that community. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
I guess taking it back to that like motivation and we're all fighting for the same thing. What got you into CS in the first place? Because I know we all have our own. Everyone has a different answer, of course. But what got you into this field? Yeah,
so I think at first it was my dad probably. I mentioned he was my mentor. He's been my mentor for like the competitive programming side of things, or like just general software engineering in general, for a very long time throughout college. But at first, he's a software engineer himself, and I kind of saw that, and I think I just decided to take some classes in high school because of it, or like a community college class, and so that was my first motivation, was I think my dad and just seeing him, and I was like, oh, I should try this out. I think it could be cool, solving these types of problems. And then when I took that community college class, I actually didn't really like it as much as I thought I would. But so when I did take that class, yeah, I did not like it, and I kind of second guessed myself. But I ended up taking another class, and I think it was a web development class, and it was much, I guess, easier than my first class I took at least. And I ended up just over time, I ended up forming my own opinion to enjoy it. I'm not sure what kind of switched to the point where I don't really like it that much, to the point where like I do like it. I think a lot of it for me at first was I was really scared of how much I touched on this earlier, but really scared of like, oh damn, I really don't know this stuff. I don't really know this stuff. And I was really scared about that. But then over time I realized how it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be in terms of difficulty. I think the difficulty really scared me at first. So over time, when I actually got to college now, and I built my first project, that's that clicking point, I think. When I built my first like website, it was actually in a hackathon, spring term freshman year, I decided, okay, I'm just gonna go and try to build something by myself, and that's that clicking point where like, oh, I could really I can do stuff and teach myself this stuff and go out on my own and build something that's cool. or that I thought was cool at the time. And that for me was that point where I was like, yeah, like this is what I like. I love doing this. Like I pretty much have the world at my fingertips. And CS, if you think about it, you have the world at your fingertips. You can learn anything you want. You just Google search, one Google search away, and you can pretty much ask any question. Someone's tried to ask that question before. You can go down a rabbit hole and learn as much as you want in that area. And you can do it to build a project, and it's not that difficult to build a project. Or it is difficult, but like it's not as hard as going to like get a degree first. Then you have to learn all this stuff before you can go do a project. Like you can do it pretty early on in your CS career, and at your computer. It's not that like you don't have to go buy resources or get funding. It's free. So that's the biggest motivator, I'd say. The project side of it, personal project side of it. I'm curious for you, what would you say yours is actually? Because I don't think I've heard your personal motivation.
My personal motivation? I guess, here, I'll ask you a question. That was kind of a follow-up. And
Sure.
if you have a different answer to mine, then I'll share my aspect. But I guess what will be your favorite part of making projects? Like what's your passion behind that? And is there like a particular aspect that you enjoy the most when it comes to developing these things?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the thinking I'm solving a problem or a problem for someone. And I think at first for me, it was solving my own problems. So I think my first app, like I mentioned, it was a hackathon project. It was just something I thought it could be useful. And it was a dorm review website. You could look, it allocates all the Google reviews for dorm reviews at OSU. And you can just see this page, get an AI generated summary for it. That I thought would be pretty useful for students, incoming students, for myself. I was like, damn, I wish I had this. So I would say that. And then it kind of transitioned into wanting or being able to build stuff for myself. So I think my second project was a Rate My Professor extension.
I still use that to this day.
Yeah,
it's crazy,
really
dude.
good. It saves so much time. And
if you guys haven't seen it, go on. It's on the web store, right?
Yeah, if you just search up Rate My Professor extension, it's probably the first one that shows up.
This guy made an extension for Rate My Professor. I think everyone we know uses it, and it's like so useful for just like when you're trying to register for those classes and you don't want to like leave the class registering website and like check the Rate My Professor like rating. It just shows it like in the like site itself, which is like it saves so much time. It's helped so many people, and I guess you can continue with that, but
yeah,
stuff like that, right?
Yeah, Havel summarized it pretty well. It just saves a lot of time. You don't have to copy and paste professor names. You can just see it right there as if it were a part of the web page.
Yeah.
It is a Chrome specific thing though, so if you don't have Chrome, sorry. I think like some Chromium web-based browsers like Arc or something use it, but so just building projects that were useful to myself are actually a really big motivator as well. And then now I just try to target, there's not a lot of stuff, like a lot of problems I need to solve for myself. So I try and think a lot about what's useful for other people. And if it's useful for myself too, it's great. But those are the projects that I work on really. And that give me the most motivation. If it's just a random project that is like, oh, build a clone of YouTube or build like a page with some text and blah, blah, blah. Like if it's something that you don't think is useful yourself, you're probably not going to have enough motivation to work on it. At least for me, that's my experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same. That was the answer I was going to give too. I really feel like my favorite aspect of all this is solving problems for people. Our main pitch for Hackathon Club when people are coming in is there a problem that you want to see solved in the world right now? In your community, something that interests you? Well, then Hackathon is the best way to actually make those projects happen, right? Like, all hackathons are is just solving problems, basically, that you see around you. And I feel like that's what engineering at its core is. That's what we do, and that's what brings us joy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, there are like extrinsic motivators and like superficial things like, like getting that big tech internship, getting a ton of money, getting paid. maybe the status that comes with being an engineer. But at its core, like, there are other professions where you can get those things, but the reason why you choose to be an engineer is so you can solve problems. And I feel like that for me is just the biggest part of it. And, you know, I feel like club leadership has been kind of an aspect where we do that, but, you know, the technical side definitely has its own benefits as well.
Yeah, I think something I want to touch on is, I guess, reflecting a little far back to what I was first mentioning about, like, my motivation. I think at first I was very motivated by fear, being very fearful for my future, or I guess wanting the most out of my future, right? I wanted the most out of my future. I was like, just basically wanting the most out of my future. I want a good job after college. That's kind of what brought me to CS at first. Very fear-oriented motivation. But over time, that kind of grew into love. It kind of touches something I've been realizing a lot is, I think you can kind of bring motivation down to like two main things. And I think it's being fearful or loving something, or basically fear and love. And if you look at it that way, I think fear does have like a purpose, because it brings you past that first barrier of a lot of the stuff, that first barrier that kind of like pushes you to do something. And then over time, it kind of grows into that love. Oh, wait, is it out of battery?
Did it turn off?
But yeah, so
okay, I think, we'll keep with the audio, I guess.
Yeah, so I think, if you look at it from that perspective, I think they have two purposes, right? Like, this is kind of getting like a weird conversation path, but I'm curious to hear if you resonate with this. But I think there's purposes for both, but you probably want to maximize how much you focus on the things you love, or what you love out of something, because that gives you just more, like we're talking about the motivation now, I think, is being able to build cool stuff for people. I would attribute that to something that's like a love motivation. And that brings a lot of fulfillment.
Well, I'm going to pause you right there. Caleb, could you like get the camera on him? Oh. Just switch between us, I guess. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, so to summarize what I was saying is, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but trying to attribute to a lot of the things that you're doing to what you love out of it is pretty important. Yeah. And it actually motivates you more that way. I think love is actually a bigger motivator than fear, but getting to that love motivator is really difficult.
Ooh, yes.
But so fear pushes you to that love motivation. But anyway, I'm just curious, what part of that resonated with you? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, okay, that's a lot of deep stuff in there. Really good stuff. I feel like when you're doing something out of necessity, it makes it really difficult to, first of all, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to be doing it as long. Take like vector calc, for example. You know, we care about CS stuff. Vector calc is kind of out of the way. We didn't really have too great of a time in the class, but we knew people who got like perfect scores on all the tests, and those people like really love doing vector calc stuff, you know. They, like, when I would talk to them about it, they would be like super passionate about like the concepts we were learning. They would go like really deep into it. They would be like, oh, this is light for me. Whereas for you and me, it's like we're sitting here like, okay, it's time to open up the vector notebook and then just like start taking notes and doing that stuff. And that made it significantly more difficult to stay committed to it. You know, it was like a chore, right? But again, like you said, if you love what you do and you actually have fun solving problems, then I feel like you're going to go so much farther in terms of success, you know?
Yeah, I'd say like try to find what you love out of it. Like I mentioned earlier, like try to find what you love out of CS. That's the most important thing. I will challenge your thought though of people, the people that did well in that class the only people who did well in that class ended up loving it. Because, well, not the only, but most people. But I will say I think people can survive, or not survive, but can thrive in a fear-based motivation. It really depends. Like, I think that's where discipline comes in, but some people just train themselves to like be motivated that much by fear, or become fearful earlier. Because I guess if you think about it, maybe the times where you struggle in the class, it might have been that you might have slacked off at a certain point and not taking the time to do it at that point, or an earlier point, or an assignment or whatever, or study or whatever. But some people, I guess, become fearful earlier. But so I think fear would be able to motivate people, but some people just don't become fearful until much later, and it ends up hurting them.
Yeah.
So I would say I resonate a lot with that, but I will say there's pushing through that, or having fear be like being your like primary motivator, or being able to push through fear ends up like making you less fulfilled, I'd say. Like maybe you can attribute it to like a fear, to like being okay with fear, but I wouldn't say over time. I feel like a lot of people would really struggle if they constantly try and pummel themselves with like fear-based things. I guess that's why a lot of people struggle in school.
Do you think?
Yeah.
I think with like if we take like the vector calc example, I think I definitely agree with you where someone who does it out of love, or someone who does it out of fear, could get the same results as someone who does it out of love, for the same reasons that you said. But if we take the fear and love aspects to something less rigid than like school and tests, something like starting a business or something like that. If I were to start a business in something that I am not really interested in, do you think that, and like you were to start a business in something that you love, do you think we could see varying levels of success there in something long term?
Yeah, I think there's probably studies on this, but to give an intuitive thought, I'd say, yeah, it's probably true. But it'd be interesting to look up after. But yeah, I'd say like in the long run, maybe the question is like, do people who... It'd probably be hard to make a study on it, because I feel like if you're doing something out of fear, you're probably struggling in making a business, for example, like the example you gave. You're probably struggling somewhere where like you feel like you have to make a business to succeed.
Right.
There's probably more people that like are struggling at that point. Whereas if you're making a business out of love, it's probably more likely that you're coming from a good spot in life. But anyway, that's an interesting question. To kind of sidetrack, yeah, I want to think about how each of those affects the person, like affects you or me. Like, how does each one affect you?
Like each one of what? Like,
yeah, like how does fear-based motivation affect your emotions?
Ooh.
Versus love-based, and maybe just in your life, how much would you say you are motivated more by fear or love, like in your life, in any aspect, or all aspects, and how you feel about that? Or yeah,
I think. Wow. Okay. Here we go.
Oh.
So when it comes to, I feel like a lot of like classes and things, that's definitely fear-based, because that's where procrastination comes from, right? It's like,
right.
I don't want to do this and I kind of have to do this. But I definitely feel like when there's something I'm passionate about, right? Like when I first came into this like hackathon position, I feel like this is the best example. When I first came in here, I was in a position where, okay, maybe I am doing it for the resume. You know, I just want to get, I know that Tom has told me this is the way to succeed. This is the way you get ahead. And if I want to, land those internships, do those jobs in the future, this is one step to getting there. But then as I started to do it, I started to kind of fall in love with this community and these people. And I started to realize, hey, like I actually want to help people and do these things. And now if we take this podcast, for example, we're going to be, right after this podcast, we're going to be going home and we're going to be spending the night, like, editing all this footage together, figuring all this stuff out. We got to get all this gear and, like, all the effort that it takes. It's like, you can't put in this much effort and not be exhausted and feel fulfilled after it.
Right.
But since we do enjoy it. We still feel exhausted and we're still super tired, but it's like, it's that sigh of relief at the end of the hackathon, at the end of whatever you do, at the end of like a long night of doing this work. You're like, okay, what I'm doing actually matters, you know? But that's my side on it. I feel like,
I think moral of the story is probably find what you love about CS, and that will put you more ahead. Spend time thinking about what you like, or spend time finding what you like.
yeah.
Moral of the story. Yeah. But yeah, other than that, do you want to talk about anything else, or do you want to wrap it up?
Final question. We talked about a lot of different stuff, and kind of the journey that you took to get to where you are today, which, you know, today we know that Sebastian actually landed an internship at Netflix. Are we allowed to say that?
Sure.
Allowed to say it? Okay. Well, congratulations on that, first of all. Big success, and it's really, honestly, it's wonderful to see someone that I feel so close to, like, actually succeeding in that way. Like, I feel like I got to see, like, that development, you know, and it's rewarding for me to see that as well. So yeah, I want to say congratulations on that. And
thank you.
For students that are watching this, we have a lot of freshmen that are watching this, and a lot of people that I know already look up to you in so many ways. For those students, you know, what is the number one piece of advice that you think that they should take away from this interview, and that they should keep in mind when they're trying to follow in your footsteps and maybe get to the place where you're at?
Yeah. So first off, I'd say knowing it's possible. Wait, is there a
what?
Yeah, so knowing it's possible, knowing you can get to a position, which, of course, if you see that I've had this success, or an OSU student's had success, you know it's possible. But aside from that, let's see. Yeah, I mean, to summarize, like, it summarizes a lot about what we're talking about, but find what you like. Find a support group or find a group of people, whether or not be a CS club community. Find a group of people that will kind of have that same drive to do well. Find the people in your classes that think that way. And also make sure to have fun while you're doing that. You don't want to, like, lose sight of yourself. I think that's something I realized freshman year. I was very grindy freshman year. And spend a lot of time working on CS stuff, which did bring benefits, but making sure you're enjoying the ride while finding that group of people, I say, is, like, the most important stuff. But also join clubs if you can. You don't have to join clubs. You don't have to find that, like, support group through clubs, but clubs is the biggest thing, honestly, that I can attribute to my success and the people I've met through the clubs. So yeah. For
sure. Well, I think that's where we'll call it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Sebastian. I really, really appreciate all the insight you gave. Very, very useful stuff. We'll have to have you back on again sometime. This was a very, very fun conversation. I'm very lucky to have you as not only, you know, a classmate and all these things, and like a fellow club leader, but as a friend. And yeah, I'll just plug a couple things. You know, Fall Hackathon is going to be November 23rd to 24th. It's coming up. So definitely be sure to register on our dev post. App Development Club meets every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. in Link 303. Be sure to show up. They're doing some really, really cool stuff. Sebastian, you want to share anything that they're doing? Any key things?
We're making a party finder. So if you want to find parties, make sure you want to, like, be able to contribute to that, you can come if you know anything about app development. And we're also making an AI chatbot assistant for you guys to help you in your classes. So look out for that. If you just want to see when these apps get released, just look us up online, App Development Club at Oregon State University, and you'll find our website, and you can just follow us there.
Yes, and for the people listening on YouTube, this will be linked in the description as well. So, yeah. But that's all we got for today. Thank you so much for joining me, Sebastian. And yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.